Hi everyone, thanks for joining me today. Today I wanted to share a brief message, really more of a teaching than a message that God revealed to me recently. It's entitled Only One King, and it weaves together three different stories of three major characters in the Bible in the Old Testament to bring forth a unifying message. So I just ask that you bear with me as we go through the three stories. I'm going to let the Word of God speak, as always. That is the truth. It's not my opinions, it's His Word. And we just ask that, God reveals Himself to each one of us through His Word as we talk about this today. So the first character from the Old Testament that I want to speak about today his name is Joseph, which obviously we're all familiar with, one of the 12 sons of Jacob, and this was as presented in Genesis chapter 41. So just to give a brief recap for those who don't recall all the details of how Joseph was put into this position of prominence in Egypt. But very briefly, due to his brother's jealousy, Joseph was sold into slavery, ends up in the prison of the king of Egypt, or Pharaoh, as he was known. And while in prison, Joseph meets two of the Pharaoh's attendants. He interprets their dreams. And meanwhile, Pharaoh is being tormented by nightmares of something that he just can't get his hands around and get an understanding of, and he's desperate for someone to interpret his dreams. Tries all of his inner circle, all of the ones who supposedly had all these great qualities and powers. None of them could interpret it. Word gets back to him about Joseph and how he interpreted the dreams of two of the Pharaoh's attendants. So Pharaoh calls Joseph forward, and Joseph interprets Pharaoh's dreams about a future famine that's coming about in Egypt and how Pharaoh should prepare for that upcoming famine. And Pharaoh realizes this is the truth, and it's a revelation that God gave to Joseph. Joseph gives all the credit to God. He doesn't take any credit for himself. But Pharaoh was extremely grateful to Joseph. And then we read in Genesis chapter 41, verses 37 to 44, which says, "The plan seemed good to Pharaoh and to all of his officials. So Pharaoh asked them, 'Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God?' Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, 'Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace. All my people are subject to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you.' So Pharaoh said to Joseph, 'I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt.' Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his finger and put it on Joseph's finger. He dressed him in robes of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. He had him ride in a chariot as his second in command." Keep that in mind. "And people shouted before him, 'Make way.' Thus he put him in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, 'I am Pharaoh, but without your word no one will lift hand or foot in all Egypt.'" So we see here how Joseph was placed as second in command of the entire land of Egypt, over all the provinces, all the people residing there. So he was second in command, while Pharaoh remained as the king, or the Godhead. Okay, keep that in mind. We're going to now move forward to the book of Esther and hear a little bit about Mordechai. So the setting for this story is in the Persian Empire, which was ruled by King Xerxes. And very briefly, Mordechai, who was of Jewish descent and was Esther's older cousin, and he had served as a father figure to her when her parents had perished. And Mordecai directs Queen Esther to bring Haman's evil plan to exterminate all of the Jews in the land. He brings it to the king's attention, or he implores that Esther bring it to the king's attention, which he does. And Haman's plan is exposed and he's killed. So then we're going to read from Esther chapters 8 and 9 and 10 a little bit, which ties this together. It says, that same day King Xerxes gave Queen Esther the state of Haman, the enemy of the Jews, and Mordecai came into the presence of the king, for Esther had told him how he was related to her. The king took off his signet ring, which he had reclaimed from Haman, and presented it to Mordecai, and Esther appointed him over Haman's estate. When Mordecai left the king's presence, he was wearing royal garments of blue and white, a large crown of gold, and a purple robe of fine linen, and the city of Susa held a joyous celebration. Mordecai was prominent in the palace. His reputation spread throughout the provinces, and he became more and more powerful. It says in Esther chapter 9. And then if we go to Esther chapter 10, which is the last section of Esther that I'm reading for this point, it says, King Xerxes imposed tribute throughout the empire to its distant shores, and all his acts of power and might, together with a full account of the greatness of Mordecai, whom the king had promoted, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Media and Persia? Mordecai the Jew was second in rank to King Xerxes, preeminent among the Jews, and held in high esteem by his many fellow Jews, because he worked for the good of his people and spoke up for the welfare of all the Jews. That was from Esther chapter 10, verses 1 to 3. So Mordecai was placed in second in command of the entire land of Persia and Media, while King Xerxes remained as the king, or Godhead. Okay, so does this sound familiar with the previous story of Joseph? Same thing. He was put in as risen up from nowhere, from very low prominence, raised up by the hand of God for a purpose, for a time, to be second in command over these lands and over these peoples at that time, while the Pharaoh and while King Xerxes still remained as the king of that land and over those people, and as the Godhead over those people. So you've seen some similarities there between Joseph and Mordecai, those two stories from the different books of the Bible. And I'm going to pause for a moment, and I'm going to ask a question to keep in the back of your mind before we continue. Why would God raise up both Joseph and Mordecai all the way up from a very low status, bring them all the way up to be second in command over the people and lands that they were in at the time? So why would God do that, right? Because obviously it was by the hand of God. That's naturally not going to happen. There's no way that those things are going to happen. But why would God do that, to bring them to second in command? And why instead would God just not appoint them as the king, as the figurehead, as the leader? So store that question for now. We're going to jump to the book of 1 Samuel and hear a little bit about King Saul's story and see how this story relates to Joseph and Mordecai and how it all ties together. So we're going to pick up this story in 1 Samuel chapter 8, when the prophet Samuel is approaching the end of his time as God's appointed leader. And keep in mind, up until this time, God had only appointed prophets or judges, starting with Abraham, Moses. You go through the different stories of the Bible. He appointed them as the leaders of the people of Israel to basically serve as God's mouthpiece, right? Not to speak their own words or to lord over the people, but to be the mouthpiece of God to these various peoples at the time. And for what purpose? To communicate God's law, God's word, and God's will for his people. Okay? So again, no kings appointed up till this time. They were, again, prophets and judges that God appointed as the mouthpiece of God, right? So it says in 1 Samuel chapter 8, when Samuel grew old, he appointed his sons as Israel's leaders. But his sons did not follow his ways. They turned aside after dishonest gain and accepted bribes and perverted justice. So all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah. They said to him, "You are old and your sons do not follow your ways." And this is what the elders representing the people's will. This is what they say to Samuel. "Now appoint us a king to lead us, such as all the other nations have." But when they said, "Give us a king to lead us," this displeased Samuel. He knew it was wrong. So he prayed to the Lord, and the Lord told him, and listen carefully here, this is the Lord's words, "Listen to all that the people are saying to you. It is not you they have rejected, but they have rejected me as their king." Powerful, right? "As they have done from the day I brought them up out of Egypt until this day, forsaking me and serving other gods, so they are doing to you. Now listen to them, but warn them solemnly, and let them know what the king who will reign over them will claim as his rights." So God is saying, okay, they're rejecting me as king, but this is what they're demanding, but give them this warning, because I'm going to warn them, this is what's going to happen if they anoint a human king over them instead of following me as their true king. So it says, Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking him for a king. He said, "This is what the king who will reign over you will claim as his right." So this is the warning, God's words of the warning that he revealed to Samuel to share with the people. "This is what the king who will reign over you will claim as his rights. He will take your sons and make them serve with his chariots and horses, and they will run in front of his chariots. Some he will assign to be commanders of thousands and commanders of 50s, and others to plow his ground and reap his harvest, and still others to make weapons of war and equipment for his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. He will take the best of your fields and vineyards and olive groves and give them to his attendants. He will take 1/10 of your grain and of your vintage and give it to his officials and attendants, your male and female servants, and the best of your cattle and donkeys he will take for his own use. He will take 1/10 of your flocks," and listen to this, "and you yourselves will become his slaves." Okay, is that clear enough? "When that day comes, you will cry out for relief from the king you have chosen, but the Lord will not answer you in that day." Okay, so God laid out his warning crystal clear, right? He's going to take your sons, your daughters, he's going to take your flocks, everything you have, and he's going to lord over you. He will make you yourselves his slaves. But the people refused to listen to Samuel. "No," they said, "we want a king over us. Then we will be like all the other nations, with a king to lead us and go out before us and fight our battles." And when Samuel heard all that the people said, he repeated it before the Lord. And the Lord answered, "Listen to them and give them a king," right? So Samuel summoned all the people of Israel to the Lord at Mizpah and said to them, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I brought Israel up out of Egypt, and I delivered you from the power of Egypt and all the kingdoms that oppressed you. But you have now rejected your God, who saves you out of all your disasters and calamities. And you have said, 'No, appoint a king over us.' So now present yourselves before the Lord by your tribes and clans." When Samuel had all Israel come forward by tribes, the tribe of Benjamin was chosen, and ultimately Saul, the son of Kish, was chosen as the king of Israel, the human king of Israel that the people demanded. And this is interesting. It says in the word that, and this is from 1 Samuel chapter 10, "As he stood among the people," this is referring to Saul, "he was a head taller than any of the others." So very tall man, muscular, strong. What are the people seeing, right? They're looking at the physical aspects of Saul, that he's this big, strong, muscular, tall man who's going to be their deliverer, their king, their protector, right? They're looking at the physical aspects, but we know that God looks at the inner aspects of a person. He looks at our heart. He looks at our obedience to him, right? The outside appearance means nothing to God. But this is what the people wanted. And it says that then the people shouted, "Long live the king," meaning King Saul. Okay? So if we jump down now to 1 Samuel chapter 12, and this is the last section, and then we're going to tie it all together. Samuel said to all Israel, "I have listened to everything you said to me, and I've set a king over you. Now you have a king as your leader. You said to me, 'No, we want a king to rule over us, even though the Lord your God was your king.' Now here is the king you have chosen, the one you asked for. See, the Lord has set a king over you. If you fear the Lord and serve and obey him and do not rebel against his commands, and if both you and the king who reigns over you follow the Lord your God, then good. But if you do not obey the Lord, and if you rebel against his commands, his hand will be against you as it was against your ancestors." The people all said to Samuel, "Pray to the Lord your God for your servants so that we will not die. For we have added to all our other sins the evil of asking for a king." So see, the light bulb finally came on, even after all of those warnings, but it's too late. They already demanded a king, and a king was anointed to them, King Saul. So it's too late, even after God's warnings. However, we have a merciful God. And Samuel replied, "Do not be afraid. You have done all this evil, yet do not turn away from the Lord, but serve the Lord with all your heart. For the sake of his great name, the Lord will not reject his people, because the Lord was pleased to make you his own. But be sure to fear the Lord and serve him faithfully with all your heart. Consider what great things he has done for you. Yet if you persist in doing evil, both you and your king will perish." Okay? So again, merciful God, even though they went against his will, he's still going to watch over them. He's still going to protect them as long as they stay faithful to him and don't go off track and continue to do evil and follow idolatry and follow others that aren't him as the true king.